It really ain't the place nor time to reel off rhyming diction. But yet we'll write a final rhyme while waiting crucifixion. For we bequeath a parting tip of sound advice for such men who come across in transport ships to polish off the Dutchmen. If you encounter any Boers, you really must not loot 'em. And if you wish to leave these shores, for pity's sake, don't shoot 'em. Let's toss a bumper down our throat before we pass to heaven, and toast the trim-set petticoat we leave behind in Devon.
Letters from the front. The following letter from Mr. R. McKinn, written at Enslin, dated January the 1st, 1900, addressed to Mr. B. McKenna of Castlemaine, is descriptive of the movements of the first contingent. Mr. McKenna receives letters every mail from some of the Castlemaine boys at the front and has kindly placed them at our disposal. Mr. McKinn writes, quote, "Well, to start with, we had a very tough time in Melbourne. Drill every day and plenty of beer at night at 1.5 shillings per pint. When we got to Adelaide, we got a lively reception when we got out the train. We formed up and marched to the town hall and had a good spread. Plenty of wine, beer and soft stuff. So-and-so must have drunk 9 bottles of lemonade. When we arrived at Albany, we had another spread. Some of the boys went into the pub and asked for a glass of beer each, but they could not drink it. It was frightful. On leaving Adelaide, we were vaccinated. My arm was very sore after it, and as it was just getting ripe, one of the fellows hit me on the arm with a slipper, which made the wounded portion turn blue. We had sports on board. We were bluffed out of the bayonet exercise, for we done it splendidly. We had to get up every morning at 6 o'clock and make our beds and scrub out the cabin passages and decks. We arrived at Cape Town on 26th of November after a pretty fair voyage, and landed on the 27th, and marched 5 miles to Maitland, where we pitched our tents. We stopped there until December the 1st, struck tents at 4 o'clock in the morning, and marched into Cape Town. Left there about 12 o'clock for the front. We were in the train 37 hours. When we got to the Orange River, we pitched our tents close to the Shropshire Regiment, which was 1,025 strong. We were out on picket one night when we were stopped by an English officer and sergeant. They could not give the password, so they could not get through. The officer got very wild and pulled out his revolver, and the moment he did so, my mate pointed his rifle at him and told him if he moved another inch, he would shoot him. We got into the place where we were camped, and our sergeant asked the officer to give up his arms, but he refused, so we got round him with fixed bayonets, a very tough-looking lot, and made him hold up his arms while the sergeant went through him. He didn't like it at all. He wanted to know to what regiment we belonged, but the sergeant would not tell him, so he said, "I suppose you are some of those bleep Australians." What a cheek he had. But we made it pretty rough for him, for we kept him there from 7:15 to 2:30 a.m. in the bitter cold. The Major came out in the morning and highly complimented us. He wanted to know who the sentries were. I thought he was going to make me his ADC at least, but it didn't pan out that way somehow. We left Orange River on 7th of December for Belmont. We were up at 3:40 a.m, struck camp and were away at 6:30 a.m, arriving at Villiputs, 11 miles distant at 9:30 a.m. We thought we were going to camp there, but we had to leave at 9 p.m, marched 2 miles out, camped there until 12 p.m, and then we moved along again. I can tell you it was very rough marching behind transport wagons. We would go about a quarter of a mile, then spell a quarter of an hour, then a little further, then stop again. We arrived at Belmont, and then you should have seen the position the Boers had. You would think that all the soldiers in the world could not shift them. I went over the battlefield and saw 2 dead Boers covered with stones, their head and feet sticking out. It was a sickening sight. We left Belmont for Enslin on Sunday, December the 10th, a distance of 13 miles, and as soon as we got there we had to go on picket duty straight away on one of the koppies. We got wet through the night, and at daylight we could hear heavy firing and could see the shells bursting up at Modder River. It was a terrible fight. Nearly all the Grenadier Guards and Black Watch were killed or wounded. They marched up in quarter column to within 50 yards of the Boer trenches when the Boers began firing right into them. The Gordons were not meant to be in the front at all because they were guard of a convoy, but they wanted to go, so General Warchop let them. And when they got within 1,000 yards, they extended on their own hook. The general turned around and said to his colonel, "Look at them. They could not do anything like that on parade." They were lying in the sun for 7 hours and were without food and water for 2 days. They came back here on the 14th in a terrible state from the sun, their legs below their kilts all being blistered. They are a jolly nice lot of chaps and would do anything for us. On Christmas Day I was on the ration party and started at 3:30 a.m. drawing water for the whole camp, numbering 1,500. Then, after breakfast, I had to go out with a wood party for wood. Those with me were a lot of Melbourne men and could not or would not use the axe, so I had to cut it nearly all myself. Got back in time for Christmas dinner such as I had never had before, roast beef and spuds with their skins on. Not bad, is it? We had a pint of beer presented to us, very tough. You could almost stand on it, it was so thick. We went on picket duty at 5:45 p.m, so had tea, curry and rice sent up to us. We also got our ration of rum, 4 tablespoons full neat measure. We got a present from the captain in the shape of 2 pounds of butter among 120 men. I don't know how he could spare it. On Boxing Day we were supposed to have some sports, but they were postponed owing to the death of the colour sergeant of the Gordons. He died of pneumonia, only had 20 minutes, buried next day. Regarding ammunition, we have 150 rounds to carry on picket, sleep with belts on and magazines. They hold 11 rounds and can be fixed without taking the rifle from the shoulder. On Saturday the 30th, up at 2:30 a.m. on picket, flies something terrible. Rum served out at night, a bottle between 50 men averaging a spoonful each. Extravagance if you like. On Sunday, the last day of the year, we came off picket at daylight. Plum puddings arrived today, and some were 1 shilling and others were 4p per tin. Church parade this morning. The men went with rifles in one hand and Bible in the other. Also 150 rounds of ammunition in their pouches. Not too slow, in one hand peace and in the other war. The blacks here are not bad sorts, but of course you must take them as they come. There is not much hope of getting a VC the way things are going, but if we get to Muggersfontein where the Highland Brigade got cut up, I don't think any of us will come back at all, for I believe it is a terrible place. The Boers have a frontage of 10 miles and 3 rows of trenches, one above the other, the whole distance, and barbed wire entanglements between them, so there is not much hope for infantry. We Australians are not satisfied. We want to get to the front. We got highly complimented by the General for our march from Orange River to Belmont. It was a record march for transports. We've got some very tough sergeants. They know about as much as a recruit. I wish you were here, but it is just as well for you. You would never eat the tucker. Coffee and dry bread for breakfast, soup and meat for dinner, and tea and dry bread for supper. 1 pound of bread has to last 3 meals. It is fairly black and sour, and we were thinking of saving it up. And when we got to the front, put it in the cannon. It would never break. No, the meals are hardly as good as at Menny's. We have a bath parade once every 5 days. We turn out in squads of 8 or 9 and walk into a hole 5 feet in diameter and 2 feet deep and throw water over one another. The water isn't exactly Malmesbury Reserve water, but you must either take it or leave it. The Boers say that the Australians are the only ones they are afraid of because they can stand the heat, but we can't get a chance to get to the front. I will give you more news next letter, and excuse pencil and writing, for they don't deal in tables and chairs and stationery here. Yeah, hi gang, here we are at the Castlemaine Boer War monument. Very impressive. Killed in actual Corporal A. Ross Victoria Mounted Rifles, maybe, Pink Hill, 12th of February 1900. Private W.A. Smith, also the Victoria Mounted Rifles, and Private E.J. Rowe, killed at Wilmansrust, 12th of June 1901. Very impressive sort of bronze lion here. Give him a bit of a rub for luck. South Africa. That's a really nice shield and cannon. That's good, isn't it? What's on this side? 1903, so a year after the war ended. Marine District. So I've had a few of you ask last week when we went to Minyip to see the mafeking tree. A couple of you said, Shez, why all the excitement about the mafeking tree? And what is the significance of mafeking? Well, I haven't talked much about the actual events of the war. So we know that the Boers laid siege to Mafeking, and I think that memorial said for 209 days or something. So when the war kicked off, the Boers made a bit of a tactical error. They laid siege to Ladysmith, Kimberley and Mafeking, which tied up a lot of Boers sitting around trying to starve these towns out, when really they should have been a mobile force. They worked best when they were fighting the British in hit and run tactics, because time was on the side of the British. The longer the war went on, the more reinforcements arrived in South Africa from all parts of the Commonwealth: Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India. And when Mafeking was relieved, it termed a new word in the English language, which was to go Mafeking. Now, the term Mafeking was when a town erupts in excitement and joy, and people drink too much and dance around in the streets and throw streamers. You've got to remember, at the time, it was front page news, this siege of the town of Mafeking. All the newspapers around the world were following the progress of this siege and hoping that the British held out. So that's a bit of information on the siege of Mafeking for you. So that's the Castlemaine Boer War monument. I've got to say, it's impressive, but Castlemaine's a beautiful place, an old gold mining town. So signing off. Hope you've enjoyed this one.